Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the NC channel. I've been asked a couple of times to share stories from my extensive travels. Yeah, I say that like I've been everywhere, but no. But I've traveled quite a bit and I have experienced a couple of amazing things in different places and not so amazing things. And I have been asked to share my experiences, and so that's what I decided to do. So I'm going to start with my trip to Thailand. Stay with me, grab a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or maybe just some water. Sit back, relax, or lie down, whatever it is that you might be doing, and enjoy. I remember checking how many hours of flight and having that fleeting feeling of dread. Really, I say fleeting because I was first petrified of the fact that I would have to be in the air for so many hours and the 6 hour time zone difference. But then it was fleeting because it was quickly replaced by the anticipation of actually going to fulfill a long time dream, really. And I have dreamt of going to Asia ever since I was in primary school. And in my primary school, there was this Chinese girl, and she had looked different, well, compared to all the other black people. And I found her looks to be quite interesting, and I wanted to see or learn more about her country. And also in high school, I remember all the Indians constantly winning prizes. So I grew up thinking that all Indians were very smart. Well, okay. I know now. Yeah. But anyway, I flew first to Kuala Lumpur and spent some time in Malaysia. And I remember on arrival, I was asked for my yellow fever card, which I didn't have. And it was funny because before flying, I had asked if I needed to take it along with me. But then the Malaysian embassy said, well, no, the fact that I had the visa meant that I had the yellow card, or I had taken the yellow fever shot, the vaccination. And so off I went without the card and then got into trouble. Luckily, they verified where I was coming from, and that quickly trumped my country of origin because at first they had gone by my passport and said, well, people from this country need to have the card. But then since I wasn't coming from my country but from somewhere else, they said it was fine. So I spent a few days in Kuala Lumpur and then off I went to Thailand and I went with a good friend of mine. And Thailand was amazing. The architecture, the food, the little, I'll call them side dishes, insects, frogs, wall geckos. They were amazing. Like I actually tried some and took pictures of myself eating them. And also, I found the people to be really nice. They seemed friendly. They were constantly smiling. They were always using polite words. And I was very impressed by it all. And the strange part were the people who constantly wanted to take pictures of me and wanted to take pictures with me, even though most of the time I looked tired, terrible, and really sunburned. And that was the first time I realized that, yeah, I could tan. People ran towards me for hugs. I was step siding them because I didn't know these people, and it was really strange to have this in the villages. And it was really good overall, really. And I loved seeing all the Buddhas because if you know me, you know I have something for Buddha. So I went to most of the temples just to see like the biggest Buddha, the Lion Buddha, all that stuff. And I enjoyed all the Thai food. It was so affordable for me. I know that for the people there, they might not share the same opinion, but for me, it was just amazing. Finally, the time to return back to my ordinary life came, and my friend and I went to the airport to board a flight from Bangkok back to Kuala Lumpur. And the plan for me was to go from Kuala Lumpur and fly directly to Europe. Extra checks at the airport is not really a new thing to me because, again, I have a very particular passport that gets that look. And I noticed that all countries that have a passport with a certain color always get extra checks. I think it's coincidence. I'm not sure. Yeah. So for me, it wasn't a new thing, and I just stand there and they look through, they flip through all the pages. I always don't look the same because of difference in hairstyles in my visas. So they look at me, they look at the passport, they'll just have all these discussions, and usually I am free to go. And so for the first time in my life, I was stopped. Then the officer said to me,
I understand you're going to take a connecting flight from Malaysia, but your Malaysian visa is just single entry, meaning that you cannot fly back into Malaysia once you leave.
and I had seen this before I left, and I had told them at the embassy in Europe, where I live, in Poland, that, well, this says single entry. Will this be a problem because I have to fly back to Malaysia to fly to, well, I was going back to France. I explained to them that because I was just taking a connecting flight, I was told that it was fine. And he was so bored and he was just like,
Oh, you're from so so and so country, yeah? That is not applicable for you. This is applicable for everybody else except for you because of your country of origin.
and I thought, oh shit. And my friend, she's really good at looking for information, really. And then she looked for it and said, look, it says everybody can go back to Malaysia except citizens from, and it, like maybe 6 countries were listed, and mine was one of them. And I was like, oh no, oh shit. And so that's how I was denied my flight, and I was asked to reapply for a Malaysian visa so that I could return to France and then Poland via Malaysia. So one of the airport assistant guides, she was weird. She was smiling and then frowning and then smiling and frowning and smirking. I really just didn't get her expressions at all. She wrote the Malaysian embassy address for me on a piece of paper. I really couldn't tell what she had written because it was not in English, it was in Thai. It was in the local language. And I just took it and ran out of the airport with my bags to hail a taxi to get me to the embassy in Bangkok as quickly as possible to get a visa, a Malaysian visa, so that I could take the next flight and go straight to Kuala Lumpur. And this I thought was going to be very easy, but it was just the beginning of my problems. As I hailed the taxi, I realized there was going to be a problem because, as I had thought I was leaving Thailand, I had tried to use up all my Thai baht, so I didn't have any money left. So I decided to negotiate the price of the journey before getting into the taxi. So I did. An elderly driver came to me. He checked the paper given to me by the lady at the airport with presumably the name and address of where I was going and asked me something in Thai. I had absolutely no idea what his question was. In English, he said,
Malaysia?
and I responded, Malaysian Embassy. I thought it was clear enough. And he nodded. He loaded my suitcases into the boot, and I got in the back. And some minutes later, he asked,
Highway?
now, typically, when you take the highway, it's always much faster, and you tend to avoid traffic this way. Now, remember, I was on a time crunch, and so I felt that was the best thing I could do. So I said yes. And the driver continued to the highway. He drove through one toll gate. I paid. Went through another. I paid. He doubled back and returned through the other side of the toll gate, turned to me and asked for the toll fare. I paid, but I was so angry because I realized that this way I would not have enough money for the fare. And throughout the ride, he kept bugging me about something. He was saying something. He was winking at me. He was tapping the seat next to him. I was really annoyed about the whole situation with the flight, so I completely ignored him. So I just sat at the back, completely ignoring him, praying that he would just take me to my destination and leave without any issues. So after like an hour, the driver turned to me and asked me how to get to Malaysia. By then, I had lost it. Like I was losing it slowly. And by that time, I said, what? Malaysian embassy? I don't know how. Look at your GPS. And he continued to drive around and around and around and finally drove to somewhere with a Malaysian flag. He came down, offloaded my suitcases, and said,
Malaysia.
gesturing towards the entrance of the building. The sign on the building read, Welcome to Malaysia Hotel. I got so upset and reminded him that I was going to the embassy, stressing the word embassy. Embassy. I started to wonder what the girl in the airport had written on the paper. The guy too got angry and started saying lots of things I couldn't understand. Luckily, I found a man who agreed to help with translations. Finally, the driver agreed to take me to the embassy and got directions from the hotel. 30 minutes later, I was dropped in front of the embassy by an angry man who practically threw my suitcases into the rain. Oh, by the way, it was raining by that time. I just was so fed up and so tired. I said, thanks. I gave him all the money I had left. He smiled, counted it, and started saying something about the money. And he started to really, really frown and get angry. So I realized that, well, I knew that I wasn't going to have enough money, but I guess he was referring to the fact that the fare was short by 50 baht. Being an African girl, I held onto my bags tightly and said in English, not caring if he understood or not, when you were busy going back and forth through toll gates, you did not know, eh? And shook my wallet for him so that he could see that there was no money in it. He entered his vehicle, spewing insults. Well, I guess they were insults, yeah, but it sounded insulting, and he drove off. Now, getting the visa. There was a very long queue inside the embassy. By the time it got to my turn, it was about a quarter to 11. The lady offhandedly told me that I could apply to a visa for Malaysia, but they might approve it or not, and I will get the answer in 2 days. I started to plead with her, telling her how I needed the visa for that day. She asked me to read the No Express Visa sign and insisted that I read it aloud for her to hear. I was remember I was already very annoyed with the whole thing, with my mistake, with the rubbish I was told by the embassy before leaving, and the fact that it really caught up with me. I couldn't fly, with the driver wasting all my time just going round and round. And now this lady is asking me if I know how to read, and I should read aloud for her to know that I can read. I wanted to really, really slap her. Sorry. But I stayed calm and read out the words. And I continued to plead, and I told her how I needed to be in Poland the day after for an important meeting that I couldn't miss, and that I was going first to Kuala Lumpur, to France, and then to Poland. And I had to do all this within a few days because I had a meeting in Poland. Actually, I had the meeting 2 days after, but I just said it was the next day. At that point, I was just saying things, well, I was just saying anything just to show how badly I needed a visa that day. She asked for the proof that I had booked a flight to France from Malaysia. I showed her my tickets. She asked for the tickets from Paris to Warsaw. I showed her, and letting me speak for what seemed like eternity because I was just talking. I can talk sometimes, a lot. So I was just talking, and then she just sat down there looking very bored, and she told me, well,
You can try your luck, but I'm sure it will not be approved. And next time, before you travel, cross check your papers 100 times before entering a plane. Don't just get excited to enter a plane and not check.
I was so angry when she said that. But well, I was the beggar, so I had no choice. And then she gave me a form and asked me to write a letter to the consulate stating my case. I had no Thai baht to pay for the visa application fee, and she said they only accepted baht. By this time, actually, she looked quite irritated with me. I kind of understood, but well, what could I do about it? She was insulting me at the same time anyway. And also, another thing I needed to do was to take a passport photograph as I had none with me. I asked the security guard for where I could take a passport photograph and change money. He nicely agreed that I could leave my suitcases with him and borrowed me an umbrella. That guy was the best person. He seemed like an angel to me with all the craziness going on. and I walked to the bank and changed money at a terrible rate. At the bank, it was really weird actually because I had pounds with me. They kept asking if these were British pounds, and I kept saying yes, yes. And then they asked me if I was from England. I said no. And then they asked me how I got pounds, and I said, well, I got them before coming to Asia. They started the whole verification process, like, why do you have pounds on you? Where did you get the pounds from? By the way, they were all pretty women. They were all checking the notes, like really scrutinizing the notes and passing it from one person to the other, which was pretty annoying, and they were just giggling over it. Anyway, they ended up changing it for me. I left the bank. I headed to where they said I could take passport photographs. In the rain, the 10 minutes walk they described to me took about 20 minutes, really. I had to keep asking for the way. I finally got to the place where the passport photograph was to be taken. Boy, oh boy, I looked so angry in that picture. But I couldn't care less. As the downpour had reduced to a drizzle, I decided to take a motorcycle ride back to the embassy. I had less than 30 minutes to apply for the visa. I ran in hurriedly, wrote a letter, shooed off a guy who kept asking everyone if they knew Ramadan and asking to help him write an official letter that he was going to Malaysia for Ramadan. Like, I was like, dude, I'm in a hurry myself. I cannot listen to you and start writing your letter for you. And at 12, the embassy was supposed to close, so I really had to hurry. Anyway, at 12, it was closed and we were told to leave the embassy because they were going on break. So I walked to the nearest hotel, a posh one, and it was a really posh one, and walked into the reception area. I asked for an electrical socket to charge my phone. I ordered sausages, grain vegetables, and water. It was the cheapest thing on the menu. Yeah, I had become like a pauper actually. Well, but it was an expensive hotel, so yeah. And then I proceeded to wait till 1:30 in the afternoon when the embassy was to be reopened after the break. In the meantime, I had to check for flights to Warsaw for the day after in case I would have to miss my flight. I saw sorry, I had to check for flights to France for the day after in case I would have to miss my flights. I saw the flight prices. I almost got a heart attack and quickly closed the pages. I then called Air France and asked if they could move my flight. The guy was like, no, madam, and explained to me how my flight ticket had the no refund change policy on it. I had gotten the cheapest one, so, well. And then he asked why I couldn't take my flight. I proceeded to explain the whole visa situation to him, and then he agreed to change my flight for 250 euros. This option seemed like the best one I had. Unfortunately, I couldn't really confirm to him when I wanted the date to be changed to, as I needed to get a feedback from the embassy first. So he told me to call him back before 5 p.m. CET to let him know. I started to pray so hard that I would get the visa that day as I walked back to the embassy. When I got there, I asked the receptionist if there was any feedback for me. She coldly told me to come back at 3 p.m. to check. I walked to the waiting area and sat down feeling very miserable and sorry for myself. She went on like,
Madam, you don't have to wait here. Please leave. Come back by 3. Maybe it will be approved or rejected by then.
and she actually stressed, rejected. I just remained seated and said nothing. After about 15 minutes of me staring at her pointedly and her pointedly ignoring me and some other people, she left her window stand. 5 minutes later, she beckoned to me. I walked to the reception point and she smiled at me. I was like, what is happening? And she was like,
Oh, you're so lucky. Your visa was approved and the consulate general felt sorry for you. And
blah, blah, blah. She just kept going on and on and on. I was so happy, collected my passport. I was about to run out when she called back to me and said that the consular wanted to meet me. And I was like, oh, okay. So a nice woman in hijab came out and asked how I was, where I lived in Poland, and told me she had been to Warsaw before and told me to always double check things and that I should also make sure I have at least $50 US dollars or its equivalent in any currency with me. She was so nice. I told her that, well, I do have that amount, and I thanked her profusely. I got a taxi, and it took me about 35 minutes to get to the airport, and we passed only through one toll gate. Shame on the morning driver. At the airport, I had to buy another flight ticket for Malaysia, for Kuala Lumpur, but I had been told that I could transfer my paid luggage to the new ticket. The cashier spent eternity staring at my passport, visa, other flight ticket, residence permit, asked me for translation to English. I said, well, I live in Poland, they speak Polish, I don't have a card in Poland that is in English. And next thing, a call was placed to my country of origin to verify something. I kept asking what was going on and I was told to wait. I waited for 25 minutes. I got the ticket and then proceeded to check in. The guy at the counter asked how I got my visa the same day. I replied that the consular general was nice. He did not believe me, and then a call was placed, presumably to the Malaysian embassy. Satisfied, he asked if I was carrying any money and how much I had on me. I replied, yeah, I have $100, which was higher than what I had been told because the lady had told me at least $50. So he walked to his supervisor and came back saying,
Sorry, madam, you cannot fly to Malaysia. One of the requirements to enter Malaysia is that the passenger needs to have 1,000 US dollars cash.
I completely lost it and told him that he clearly did not know what he was saying. I showed him a letter that came with a visa and also read that it was $50 per day and I was only going to be in Malaysia for 2 hours, which meant I only needed $50. He looked very confused and walked to his supervisor and came back and said,
Madam, we just checked with Malaysia. They say based on your country of origin, you need 1,000 US dollars on you.
I angrily told him that they were all confused and that the only thing I needed to have with me was a yellow fever card, knowing fully well that I did not even have that card with me. This annoying guy refused to answer me. He managed to smile whenever he looked at me. I was so mad. I asked if I could show my bank account instead. He smiled and said,
No, madam, cash only.
I started producing all the money I had on me: euros, pounds, Malaysian ringgits, Polish zlotys, Thai baht. The guy calmly did the conversions and told me that I needed to produce more money and he would be satisfied with 500 US dollars more. Whew. I told him how I did not want to withdraw any money because of the terrible rate at the airport. He smiled at me and said,
You have no choice.
there was an American who they were giving hell to as well, and both of us joined forces to tell them how they were completely confused and just saying anything they liked and trying to pass them off as roles. By then, I was so annoyed, so there was really no filter anymore. My flight was at 5 p.m. This was the last flight I could take from Thailand, from Bangkok to Kuala Lumpur to catch my flight back to France. At 4:30, seeing that the guy wouldn't budge, I asked if I could withdraw foreign currency from the ATMs. He smiled and told me to go and check. I went and came back to tell him that, well, it seems like I can only withdraw baht. He glared at me and said,
This is Thailand. Of course you can only withdraw baht.
I got so angry and started saying how I don't want any more useless Thai baht and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I called their money useless. I was extremely upset. I shouldn't have said that. But he just acted like I wasn't there and he was just looking right through me. Mind you, there were other people saying things like this as well, so he was just ignoring all of us. At 4:45, he told me that the gates were about to close for boarding and he would move me to the 7 p.m. flight. That's not possible, I thought. I would most likely miss my flight to France. I ran to the ATM, withdrew the money, and ran to show it to him. He counted it ever so slowly, stamped my ticket, checked in my bag, and asked an attendant to go with me through the gate so that I would be allowed through. We landed in Malaysia, and absolutely no one asked me for proof for money. Shame on Thailand. Malaysia, however, had its own check processes. They wanted to know why I had spent only a few days in Malaysia before going to Thailand and why I was going back to France and then to Poland. I said, well, I live in Poland. But they said, so why France? I said, well, I'm going to take a flight from France to Poland. And I explained to them about my life in Poland, show them my residence card. And each time I show them my residence card, they would take it and shine some lights through it. I had no idea what they were doing. At some point, one of the guys took the card and folded it into two. And that's when I started to scream. What the hell do you think you're doing? He ignored me and put the card on the table. It lay flat. He looked satisfied and stamped my ticket. Boarding the plane, each passenger just showed their blue or black passports and were ushered in with a smile and wished a safe flight. Me, with my passport, not so lucky. I was pulled aside for a final check, while passengers with their annoying blue passports passing by me and staring. One Chinese guy actually was stopped with me, and we were finally ushered through. And I don't remember if they wished us a safe flight, but I don't care. I just needed to go home. In the flight, I kept asking for more food as I was practically starving. It seemed like the longest flight I had ever flown. Actually, at that time, it was. They were so nice in the plane. They kept bringing me food. It was funny. They kept bringing me food and asking me if I wanted more stuff, and I was obviously saying yes. And they were so nice again, so I got the same Asian hospitality, which could be amazing, and it was. I had never been so happy to land in Paris. I smiled happily at what seemed like freedom and looked forward eagerly to the flight to Poland. Yes, for the first time in my life, I was super happy to arrive in Poland. So, this actually was my first time in Asia, and this is the experience I had. Apart from all the craziness with returning home and me begging to be allowed to return home, it was actually an amazing time. And I still remember the food, I still remember everything. I still remember the hospitality, which my Asian friend said is fake, but they do to foreigners. And I would really recommend it, but don't be like me. Check your passports. Make sure that if you have a connecting flight, you have a visa that doesn't say single entry, even if you're told that it's okay. Always make sure you get multiple entries and have fun. I hope you enjoyed the story. So let me know if you would like more stories like this of my trips to different places. Believe me, not all of them are crazy, some are just absolutely delightful. Thank you for listening. If you have listened all the way to the end, I really appreciate it. And I hope you also take the time out to like and subscribe. And if you have any comments whatsoever, please leave them in the comment section. I will be reading. Thank you. Kisses. Bye.